Hey, what's going on, guys? Tubasa here. One thing that you might not assume from me being a huge gamer is that I also read books. And I try about every year to read at least one book, and I want the book to be something that really catches my eye. And so I've read a couple different books throughout the past couple of years, and I thought I'd share some with you to see if you're interested in reading them, or if you have read them, then, you know, you can relate to me, I suppose. So, the first book that I got here, and this is in no particular order, this is A Clockwork Orange. This book is about a 15-year-old kid who is kind of part of this like little gang with his buddies, and this is in England, and they end up betraying our main character for a bit, and he gets put into this position which he is taken in by a guy that he had actually raided. And so he gets a little paranoid. And what I will say is at the end of the book, if you read the 21 chapter version, not the 20 chapter version, then the book is really good. And it's a great story about growing up and becoming, a man or going into adulthood. One of my favorite things I liked from this book that was unique is that it uses some slang terms that no one's ever used, like Riz or Gyat. Instead, it uses some other terms, and when you're reading the book, you kind of pick up on what it means and what each slang term means. And I just find it a very cool thing because it's not a real word. It's made up. The author, as far as I'm aware, made it up. And to be able to decipher what it is really made it a kind of piece of candy that the reader can chew on. The next one, I've cried to this book, and you'll see with a lot of these books, they're quite dystopian. But this is Osamu Dazai's No Longer Human. This is rated the number 2 book in Japan, I believe, and it is about a man who can't really relate to anyone, and he doesn't want anyone getting close to him. And this leads him down a very interesting path of life in which he meets a friend, and that friend is not necessarily the most responsible person and gets this guy involved in drugs and alcohol. And throughout this guy's life, he also tries to get into some relationships, and at one point even tries to game end himself. And he eventually ends up in a psych ward after all the drugs. This is a very sad read, in my opinion. I did cry reading this, but it is something that has left an effect on me because the one thing that I've gotten out of this book is the quote, "Everything passes." And I think it's a great takeaway because it makes you look at life a little bit more in a patient manner, I would say. The next book we have is A Brave New World. This is one of the first books I picked up when I was in high school because I was in my psychology class and my professor was like, hey, you guys need to do a quick summary review on this book. Despite us not even reading it, he just wanted us to show something about psychology. I forgot. But this book was great. And turns out, if you've read 1984, it is almost the exact same. In fact, it is a precursor because this book has come out before 1984. I find this book to be a lot more interesting personally because people are kind of divided into their own groups based on how they manipulate the gene pool. And the main focus of this story is this character from a sanctioned area in New Mexico. Breaking Bad reference, I know. Uh, his name is not Jesse, by the way, from what I remember. Uh, he wants to go to this brave new world, which is the rest of the entire world, because it's all colonized into one giant super country, basically. And he travels outside of his restricted area and he gets to learn about the environment around him. And it is, again, a very sad read. I cried reading this one too. And the end is very, very melancholy. Again, it's another theme you'll see throughout a lot of these books, is that it's very sad, very melancholy, and it makes me cry. But this one by far is one of my favorite ones. I would say I highly recommend it for people who liked 1984 if they read it while they were in class. Because some people don't read the books, and I don't get it. I had this time where when COVID struck, I was reading Death of a Salesman, and I was the only person that actually finished reading it. And it was great. Death of a Salesman is a great story. It's supposed to be a play, but we just read the manuscript, and it was very sad. Again, a reason why I like Death of a Salesman. But moving on, you guys might recognize this one. This is American Psycho. I had originally, been exposed to the internet. I've seen all the memes, but I had not actually seen the movie yet. And so I thought, why don't I get the book first, read it, and then watch the movie? And what I will say is, like everyone else that has read the book is so much better and so much more darker and so much more gruesome than the movie. I remember reading the chapter, I think it was called Tuesday, for the first time, and my jaw dropped when I hit the end of that chapter. And there's a bunch of stuff that they left out. Like, did you know Patrick Bateman has a brother that he despises? I bet you didn't, unless you read it. And it's a lot of those smaller things that really help build the character, especially when he talks about clothing. In the movie, Patrick Bateman never talked about what people were wearing. He would just wear it. Whereas in the book, almost any time someone shows up, he is from head to toe analyzing what they're wearing, what kind of brand it is, what specific material is it or color. And it adds a whole lot more to Patrick Bateman as a very analytical psychopath. The next book is not necessarily dystopian, more so that it is Lovecraftian. This is The King in Yellow. This book, I was intrigued when I had been watching a YouTube video talking about The Hanged King, which is a SCP. I forgot which number specifically it was, but if you do know which SCP it is, leave it down in the comments. Much appreciated. The King in Yellow is comprised of 4 short stories, and it is about these people who end up coming into contact with this plague called The King in Yellow, and they slowly descend into madness in one way or another. I don't remember if a lot of them game end themselves or whatnot, but I do know that it does drive these people mad. And it's interesting reading a short story book compared to, all the other books that I've read, because there's not enough time for character development, which I think might push some people away. But the thing is the focus is actually on the idea of the play itself. So throughout these 4 stories, you kind of understand how this play affects people and how it's kind of like this myth or this rumor. So I really like it, and obviously it's got a paper cover on it. So when you take off that paper cover, it's pretty sick because it's just a black book with The King in Yellow on it. So I thought that was really cool. The next book that I read was one in which I decided for the linguistic challenge of reading it, and that is Dante's Inferno. I had ran into an English professor on my campus one day, and I had mentioned, oh yeah, I read Dante's Inferno, it's pretty good. And he was like, really? You should take an English class. And I was like, I probably should. I like reading and writing. But Dante's Inferno is about a guy who descends into hell and then has to quickly, get out after he was shown everything. Now, I can't really say much else beside that because, dear God, this was a trouble reading just due to the fact that it's Old English. The premise is pretty cool, and I do wish that they had released maybe like a translation next to it when I bought it. And they probably are versions of it that do have it translated, but I think reading it in the Old English way is very interesting to try and decipher what's going on. This next book is the one I most recently finished, and it took me the longest to read, clocking in at about 6 months, I want to say. And that is, yeah, House of Leaves. A couple of people talked about it on YouTube. If you've stayed around like the literature area of YouTube, this is a highly talked about book, and it is a big boy. It's like 700 pages. Now, originally, I'm not going to get too much into this because I do want to make a separate video talking about this book. So let me know if you want to see that, and I will, I will put it out eventually when I get the comments saying we want it, please. So, but this book is very, very deep, and at first, I was a bit intimidated by it because some of these pages, and I'll show for reference. Some of these pages just don't have anything on them at all. Some of them have a lot of text. Some of them you'll see have different fonts and different formats. And this all plays into the idea of what's going on in the book. Now, I will say, when I finished reading the main part of the book, there's an appendices. If you have read this book and not read the appendices, I highly, 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 highly encourage you to read the appendices. The appendices have so much lore drop that it brought me to tears. I was so shocked at what happened in the appendices, more than the book itself. And the appendices help kind of remind you of everything that's happened up until this point, and then just drops a bombshell on you. I kid you not. There is a cipher in here that you have to cipher out. I have the page right here. This is the entire cipher for this book, and it is sad. I cannot wait to talk about this book again. If you want to see this sooner than later, let me know down in the comments, because I already have a bit of a script or outline laid out to what I want to talk about. But this book, when I got done with it, highly regard this as one of my favorite books of all time, for how it's written, how it's formatted, how deep it got, and how dark it got. And finally, we get to the Goth Pack 101 book that everyone needs if they plan on getting a goth girlfriend, and that is The Crow by James O'Barr. I read this all, I believe, in one sitting, and I don't think there's really another way to read it. It is such a heart-wrenching story, and the fact that this book is very reflective of the author's life makes it even more sad. I give all of my praise to James O'Barr for taking so much pain and putting it into these pages. Now, this is a graphic novel. This is not just your typical book. This is, if you will, in the most underhanded terms, a comic book, but this is a graphic novel, and it is beautiful. It is beautifully sad, and I freaking cry. I cried a lot when I'm reading this book. It was amazing, to say the least. And things like this inspire me to write. These authors who open themselves up and show their vulnerabilities and show their sadness and how they feel about things and what's going on in their life is something that inspired me to make, my YouTube channel and inspired me to make my journals. So thank you, James O'Barr. I really do enjoy reading The Crow, and I don't think, besides the very first rendition of it, I don't think any of the movies have unfortunately lived up to it. But I will say, if they ever decide to make a new Crow, they should cast me. I will put 110,000% effort into being the Crow. I'll grow my hair out again, and I will, you know, be that man. I will be Eric. I feel Eric's pain, and I feel James O'Barr's pain through this book. And that's it. That is my short book collection that I have. My roommate has recommended me A Cat's Cradle, and he kind of told me a bit of the premise of it. I might get it. I really am on the fence about it because it hasn't dragged me in, but he said it's a short read, so it might be worth it. But let me know down in the comments what you guys think, or maybe what book I should read next that you guys thought was really good. I know that there's a Blood Meridian or something like that. I saw it on Wendigoon's channel. I think it might be something I might look into eventually when it comes back into my head and when I feel like reading another book. But if you have any other ideas or suggestions, please let me know down in the comments. Make sure to like, subscribe, and I hope you guys have a good night. Peace.